We're going to look at chapter 10 this week. Before we read the text, though, can somebody just recap what were some of the things we talked about last week?
God can use broken people.
Yes, that's right. God can use broken people. He uses broken instruments, broken tools. That's good news for me anyways. I don't know about you, but that's powerful. God is able to use broken tools, broken instruments, broken people. What else? What else did we talk about? That was a big one. That's important. Anybody remember anything else we talked about? Noah's sin, yeah, absolutely. Noah sinned. The man whose name meant rest, and the hope was that maybe he would bring the rest that humanity was looking forward to. He might be that one, and he failed. He wasn't the one. So we look for another. Right? We constantly looking forward to another. So Noah sinned, and his son sinned as well. Right, one of his children. Which child sinned? Ham. And then Noah curses
his son.
Yeah, his son, one of his children, Canaan. And we talked a little bit about that. We also talked briefly about the the curse of Ham, which is an unbiblical doctrine that some people have held in the past. And it's not something that we should ever entertain. That's simply an ungodly, unbiblical idea. Anything else that you think of that we talked about? All right, let's read the text in Genesis chapter 10. We're going to look at 10 now. You know what? We're not going to read it. I'm going to spare you. Although I didn't spare you on Sunday, so I'll spare you today. Because chapter 10 is a long list of genealogy, a long list of names. Maybe if Melvin was here, I'd have him read it. Did a good job. But Genesis chapter 10, kind of briefly look at the text. You can look it over here. And it's basically a breakdown of the names and lines of descendants of Noah and his three sons. And so it tells us about the children. It tells us who they kind of fathered, and some of the nations as well as some of the cities that come from these children. And basically we know that all the nations of the earth, all people come from these three children through their father Noah. But let me ask this question: Why do we have genealogies? Just in general, maybe not even biblically. Just why do people even care about genealogies?
It's a sense of history.
A sense of history. Okay, yeah.
That's what I was going to say. Learn more about your family.
Learn more about your past.
I said curiosity. You want to know from whence we came.
Yeah, curiosity. Who's in the past, and
There's also a legal aspect to it.
okay, a legal aspect. In what way? Well, what do you mean? There's a legal aspect. Yes. Go ahead.
Well, I don't know.
All right. I agree with you as a legal aspect. Yeah.
Health.
Legality due to offspring and inheritances and things of that nature. Right. Even today, right? You inherit land from your great-great-grandfather. So there's some legal things. You have to prove that you own that, or that you're the heir. If there's a will involved, right? People are looking for the surviving heir, and so you have to have a lineage and that kind of stuff. Go ahead.
And in this day and age, we trace diseases that way.
Okay. All
I
right.
mean, it's not something that was back in biblical times.
Right. Yeah, yeah. So there's a lot of reasons. So genealogies just in general are important. And one of the big things has already been mentioned, is they connect us to the past. There's a connection to the past. There's something that kind of holds the line. There's a tether to the past.
It gives us a sense of belonging.
Belonging, absolutely.
That we fit in.
Yeah,
We're not
yeah.
out here alone.
Yeah, we come from somewhere. There's a history. There's a rootedness kind of thing. Typically, when you see a genealogy, it's a tree, right? You see the genealogy tree or something like that, and then it goes down to a trunk, and then there's roots and stuff. It's just kind of describing in picture form that idea of connectedness, and so we're not just left hanging out. So they connect us to the past. Ultimately, biblically, these genealogies are important because they ultimately are pointing forward to Christ. They end up being proof that Jesus is who he claimed to be, right? If you read the genealogies in Matthew and Luke, what's the point of tracing the genealogy? Why are they there?
The link from Adam to Christ.
Yeah, it's the link. It's proof. It's in some ways divine confirmation, right? Because the Christ, the Messiah, was supposed to come through a certain lineage, and what's that? Right. Right, by prophecy, he's supposed to come through a certain lineage. So those genealogies are important because they're, again, confirming proof that Jesus is who he said he was. If somebody was claiming to be the Messiah and yet they were born somewhere other than what the scriptures prophesy, and they were born to some parents other than, David, it's not David's offspring, then they have no legal, prophetic, biblical right to claim that kind of thing. They're not in connection there. So this is ultimately going to point us forward to Christ, and it's this tethered line back and forth. Now in verses 5, 20, and 31, it mentions that each clan had their own language. And in verse 32, it says that the nation spread abroad on the whole face of the earth. Let me just throw this picture up, which is what I wanted to do, if I can. Can I get it over there? This might have all been for nothing. Oh, there it is. I don't think I can get it anymore, though. I've lost it. Anyways, as you can see, this picture right here. That was well worth my time setting this up, wasn't it? I don't think I could get to that picture if I tried. Let me see if I can try this again. No, it's over there again. All right, anyways, that little picture there would have been a great little picture for you to see. All it did was show where all of the descendants of Ham and Japheth and Shem and all of them, where they moved in the area, in the biblical area. So anyways, we can't look at that, so pay no attention to that now. Basically what you see is you've got these big strips of where all the descendants kind of migrated to, and it's the biblical kind of lands. It's Babylon and Egypt and Assyria and all that kind of stuff. It would have been great. It's a phenomenal picture.
Basically, Jacob went to Europe, and Ham's descendants went towards Africa south, and Shem's Japheth. Shem's was the Holy Land, and in that area.
Yeah, and there's some pieces that are mixed and mingled. Some of the kids went here and there or whatever. But anyways, I was going to show that just to give you a visual, but it didn't work out. Anyways, verses 5, verses 20, 31, they mention that each clan had their own language. And then again in verse 32, it says that the nation spread out abroad on the earth after the flood. Now here's the question. Is there a contradiction between chapter 10, those that I just mentioned there, that says each clan had their own language, and chapter 11, verse 1? Chapter 11, verse 1 says what? Somebody read that.
The whole world had one language and a common speech.
All right. Is there a contradiction here?
Seemingly.
Yeah.
Seemingly, right? Chapter 10, it says everybody had their own languages. You know, all the different tribes and all that kind of stuff. And then 11, they had one language.
Isn't that,
Which is it?
Isn't it futuristic, maybe?
Is it? Okay, maybe. Maybe. What's futuristic?
Well, he's speaking of what's gonna happen, even though it hasn't happened, that he's speaking of it, the future as if it's in the present, their languages and their nations. That's how it's gonna be,
Yeah,
eventually, and this is what happened after Babel.
absolutely. That's exactly what's going on here. So there is no contradiction. Think back to Genesis chapter 1 and 2. What is Genesis 1 about?
Creation.
Adam and Eve.
It's about the creation. It's about the 7 days, right? 6 days of creation. God rests on the seventh day. And then what is chapter 2 about?
Zeroes in more on Adam and Eve.
Yeah, it zeroes back into day 6.
Yeah, it emphasizes things that happened in chapter 1, but it's kind of a closer view of some activity.
Absolutely. It's explaining it a bit more, right? So this is a common theme that you'll see. The biblical writer Moses he'll take a big broad sweep of history, give you kind of the big picture. That's chapter 10. Here's the big picture. They all go out. They're going to have these different languages, that kind of stuff. So it's futuristic, as you had said. And then the next chapter, they go back some. He goes back and he wants to zoom in on something, wants to describe a specific thing, a specific event that happens within that time. So same thing that happened in chapter 1 and chapter 2 is happening here in chapter 10 and chapter 11. He goes back a bit. He wants to give some detail. One final thing to note about chapter 10 are the nations that come from Ham. When you look, you remember that Ham was the son who sinned against his father. And we talked a little bit about the idea of children following in the footsteps of their parents. It doesn't always happen, but a lot of times it happens. We saw this with Cain. Cain kills his brother, and Lamech, who comes from Cain's line, is worse than him. He's 10 times worse, a man. He's following in the footsteps of his father Cain, but he's worse. Ham, if you'll notice, Egypt comes from Ham. Babel, which becomes Babylon. Assyria, the Philistines, the Canaanites. All of these groups are people that either harassed, attacked, or brought into captivity later on the people of Israel. And they're wicked, pagan kind of cultures. Nineveh, the Assyrians, Nineveh was super wicked, which is why Jonah didn't want to go to Nineveh. You remember that? Jonah didn't want to go to Nineveh? Because he said, I know that you're going to give him an opportunity to repent. These people were super wicked. They were super bad. So just kind of notice that. And what's the takeaway for us? If this is the descendants, and, clearly there's just, bad people all over the place. But look at how many of these nations come from Ham. These ones that we think of as wicked and all of that kind of stuff. What's the takeaway for us?
Your descendants are going to follow the way you live.
You set the example.
Yeah.
Your children, your grandchildren, the people around you when you gather Sunday morning, the family of Christ. You are an example. We are an example to the next generation. What they see us doing, they may very well do themselves, and they may do it to a greater degree. The question is, what are we teaching them? Not simply with our words. We need to have words, right? We need to be telling them right and wrong. But here's one of the worst things you can do is say, do what I say, but not what I do. That's one of the worst things. Because the kids are going to be like, what? As they get older, they go, yeah, okay, sure. So it's really important that we got to take this kind of stuff seriously. You are an example to people around you. You have an influence. We have influence on everyone, not just our children. Our children may be older, but what about our grandchildren? What about the kids in the congregation? You are an example. And we want our example to be a godly example. And of course, we want our children and the people that we're influencing around us, we want them to be better than we are, not worse. So we want to give them a good example. So the question we ought to be thinking about, all the time is, what am I teaching people by the way I'm acting? What are they seeing? And is it a good, godly example? Or is it an ungodly example? Do I have words that sound good, but my actions counteract that? Something to think about. A serious thing to contemplate. And again, even if you personally do not have children, there are children here. There are young adults here. There are young people here. You are an example. So don't be like Ham. Right? Don't be like Ham. All right. Anybody got anything else in the genealogy? If you want, we can read it. Anybody dying to read it? Richard, I see you're itching for it.
No.
Like, please, can we read it? All right. If nobody wants to read it, we're going to move on to chapter 11. Nobody had any questions, thoughts, comments in there? Okay.
You talk about the influence
Yeah.
that we have on one another, and that we want our children to pick up on the things that are good and right and so forth and so on. But in a materialistic society, we're saying today, I want my kid to have more than I ever had. Is that right?
Is that right? That's the question. That's a good question. What do you think?
I don't think so.
No, you don't think it's, I want them to have more, and you mean materially, right?
Yeah, material.
I didn't have, I had 2 baseball cards. I want to buy them 7 boxes of baseball, right? That kind of thing. No, what do you think? What do you think?
Depends on what you learned with less. I mean, what did it teach you if you had less? And you have to look at your heart. What did it teach you growing up? What did it teach you having less? Do you want your kids to know that? Is that what you want to have in your children's heart? Give them the same if that's what you want. I mean,
Yeah, it's a tough thing because those of us who did come from very little, we do want to give our kids, but Bernie brings up a great point, and that is, are we teaching them to be materialistic? Maybe you've seen, maybe you've experienced your own children or grandchildren as you go, I've experienced it with mine, you go into the store and they expect that you're going to get something. And when they get nothing, it's a tantrum.
Look at the technology these days. I mean, you could set a kid down with a tablet and he'd be happy for 8 hours. I mean,
As long as you buy the game that's on there that you...
that's the thing, I mean, I wasn't raised up like that. I
Yeah.
wasn't able to have that kind of stuff, I mean,
Yeah.
Dad told me to get some sticks and go play in the yard or something, I mean, that's,
Yeah, right, yeah.
and now we
And
have
if you
all
poked your eye out, walk it off, buddy, walk it off. You'll be fine.
and I think about that every time they sit down in front of a TV or anything like that. It's
Yeah.
easier as a parent just to say, "Oh, go watch TV. Go do something. Leave me alone for a little bit."
Yeah.
But really, are we doing right? I mean, are we teaching them that, hey, let's just sit down and watch TV and be lazy about it? And I think about that every time I get in the middle of doing something, and I'm like, just leave me alone. Watch TV or something.
Yeah.
I mean, am I doing the right thing?
No, you shouldn't do that.
Yeah, tough stuff. Good questions to be reflecting upon, though. I mean, these are definitely good things to be thinking about.
I think if you go back far enough to people that lived through the Depression and some of that kind of thing, they probably did want better for their children. They didn't want their children to have to go through those things.
Right.
And I think it's natural now. It's not just that we want more for our kids. I think we want more for ourselves.
That's
Amen.
true.
But I think you also have to remember, though, the more that you have, I think the more responsibility you need to have. For
That's
others.
true.
I mean, for others, and just the examples that you set.
Absolutely, absolutely. So again, all this goes back to example too. The world we live in is very materialistic, and so we need to be cautious because we can turn into idolaters.
Yeah.
And we can teach our children to become idolaters, right? Very easy. And not even be thinking about it, right? It's something that you grow up in, and it's very easy to allow that to kind of sway you. So you give your kids everything, and we end up turning ourselves and our children into idol worshipers, where this is the everything, the end all be all of life is how much you got.
And the thing that I think is interesting too is that the underprivileged countries right now have more people leading to Christ and becoming Christians than we even have in our own nation with all we've got.
Oh yeah, I've said plenty of times that often we think about people in Haiti or some of these other countries real poor or whatever. We think about the brethren there, we think about the Christians there, and we kind of have pity on them. And I think in some ways we're the ones to be pitied because they know that they only have a hope in Christ, right? Because they have no hope in this life. This life is hopeless for them. There is nothing. For us, we can be very easily distracted. We can put our hope in the things of this world, the material things or whatever it happens to be. We can put our hope there, and it can turn into an idol. It can. It's very easy to do. There's a song that says, everybody wants to go to heaven, but nobody wants to die. There's another one that says, something along the lines of, come Lord Jesus quickly, just not today. Not today. Because I got stuff I want to do. But if we were living in poverty, we'd be saying, come Lord quickly. Come Lord quickly. So yeah, again, I'm with you on that.
And you've got people in some of those third world countries too that don't have anything, and if you've ever been on a mission trip, you see this. People that don't have anything, they're happy.
Yeah.
They're content. They're contented.
All right.
They don't know better.
I
You're
can,
right,
I
they're
can
just-
speak on that.
Yeah.
I've tried getting those material things, and he kept me from them. I have found complete contentness with nothing at all. And
Now the opposite we've got to be cautious of too, right? We can't just look at people because we have something and think, bad me, let me, beat myself up or anything. If we have anything, it's to be used for God's glory. You have a vehicle, and there's a brother or sister in Christ that needs a ride somewhere. Whose vehicle is it? It ain't yours. God has given it to you that you might bless someone else. But that's a different mindset, and you act a different way when that's the case. So we're not materialistic. We're striving to be, followers of Christ, and whatever I have is yours. Yours is mine, mine is yours, that kind of thing. I'm given it that I might bless you, that I might strengthen you, and the people in the world, right?
This brings up another question.
Sure.
You're talking about using what we have for somebody else. In the years of ministry, I've experienced this time and time again. You offer to help somebody and they say, oh no, we don't want to put you out. That's very bad too.
Yeah.
Yeah, try that on me.
Rich has been waiting for people to offer me something. No, yes. This is, I know.
Does pride enter into that?
Absolutely. I think with guys anyways, and I can only speak from a guy's perspective, I'm much more likely to help you than let you help me. It's something that we need to cut off. We need to get rid of that kind of thing, but it's something that many men struggle with. I don't mind helping you, but when it comes to me needing something, I'm less likely to take it or reach out or something along those lines. We definitely can do better in that area. We need to grow in that area. That's true. Ladies, do you ever struggle with that or no?
I was gonna say, I don't think it's a man thing.
Okay. It's a human thing. So ladies, you're willing to help someone, but you don't want them to help you necessarily.
My friend Joe Burnett tells a story about a man taking a instrument to a blacksmith shop to be fixed, to be repaired, like a shovel or something like that. And after the blacksmith had finished that, the fellow then asked him how much he owed him, and the blacksmith said, "You don't owe me anything." "Oh yes, I insist on paying you." "No, you don't owe me anything." He says, let me stretch my soul. Let me stretch my soul. And he was saying then, if you don't pay me, I'm stretching my soul and reaching out to you. And that's what I need to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Give other people the blessing of carrying the stretcher. You know, there was a paralytic man. And the friends brought him to Jesus. The man needed to be on the stretcher. Give your brothers and sisters the opportunity to be like Christ and to bless you. If you need something, let it be known. Let somebody, and give them that opportunity. Yeah. It's pride, it's don't want to put people out, whatever it happens to be, but it's something that we should be striving to fight against. If you need something, you shouldn't feel embarrassed to ask for help. And we, as the family of Christ, ought to be willing to jump at those opportunities to minister to one another. So, yeah, all of this is good stuff to think about. And the next generation sees what we say and what we do. And they're either going to be better or worse. Will they follow in our footsteps in a positive example, or will they follow in a negative example? And we pray that we'll be better examples, and the next generation will be following Christ as well. All right. Let's look, with the little bit of time we got left, let's read chapter 11, verses 1 through 9. It's somebody who would like to read 11, 1 through 9.
Now the whole,
It's going to be in stereo.
Go for it.
now the whole world had one language and a common speech. As men moved eastward, they found a plain in Shinar and settled there. They said to each other, "Come, let us make bricks and bake them thoroughly." They used the brick instead of stone and tar instead of mortar. Then they said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city with a tower that reaches to the heavens, so that we may make a name for ourselves and not be scattered over the face of the whole earth." But the Lord came down to see the city and the tower that the men were building. The Lord said, "If, as one people speaking the same language, they have begun to do this, then nothing they plan to do will be impossible for them. Come, let us go down and confuse their language so that they will not understand each other." So the Lord scattered them from there over all the earth, and they stopped building the city. That is why it is called Babel, because there the Lord confused the language of the whole world. From there, the Lord scattered them all over the face of the whole earth.
All right. So, verse 1, it says that the whole earth, they had one language, they were of the same speech, all of that. What does verse 2 tell us?
They settled.
Okay. Where did they travel? Eastward. Some translations may say from the east. Mine says from the east. The better rendering, I believe, is they traveled toward or eastward. Have we seen this idea of traveling eastward before? Clay, you're shaking your head, yeah?
Yeah, I remember, I just don't remember where.
You remember, you don't remember where, that's all right. Do you remember what the idea is? What's the symbolism when people move eastward, typically?
Star.
What's that?
Star.
Say it again.
Not star.
The star? The star came from the east, right? The men came from the east, but this is traveling to the east.
Away from the Garden of Eden.
Okay, so originally it was away from the Garden of Eden and away from the presence of God, right? It's symbolically going away from the Lord. They're traveling away from. So not all the time, but quite often you'll see this idea of moving eastward, going to the east, something like that. And it typically is the idea of moving away from God. There's a rebellion that goes with this. They're moving away. Now, and did we see that in this text? We absolutely see it in this text. But this eastward movement, they're going away. Now what's important is, and we'll get to Abraham. Abraham comes from, anybody know, comes from what area? He comes from Ur the Chaldees, the Babylonian area, the area of, he comes from the east. And he travels west. He's traveling towards God.
That's why you came out here?
That's right. Pagan northeast, yeah. Traveling towards God.
I have a question.
Sure.
In the graveyards, aren't the graves pointed toward the east?
Traditionally, and that would be because of what?
Christ coming from
Which is the rising and all of that, right? So there was a belief that he would come from that way. Yeah.
Okay.
That's why some of the graves, older ones anyways, were pointed that kind of direction.
Well, that scripture is somewhere is that as the lightning comes out of the east to the west, so shall the coming of the Son of Man be. That, I don't know where it is, but that's...
Yeah, Matthew 24, I believe, is the text. It's in there. Yeah, so going from east to west is symbolic of, and you'll see it in the life of Abraham, and you also see it when Israel is in captivity in Babylon and then they come out of captivity. Why did they go to captivity? Anybody remember?
They were disobeying the Lord.
They had rebelled against God. They were following false idols and pagan practices and all that. God vomits them out of them, right? The land vomits them out, and they go eastward. They end up in Babylonian captivity. And then, of course, they come back out of that. They are returning to God. So again, not all the time, but quite often. Read the context, look around, and you'll see quite often there's this symbolism that's going on where going eastward is a bad thing. People are walking away from God. And then coming westward from the east is a good thing. The wise men came from the east, seeking God, that kind of thing.
I'm glad you came this way then.
Yeah, me too. Now that was, yes, right. I'm moving towards God. I got to keep going though. Okay, right? No, have we stopped here?
No, you found it.
He's here. He's here. He isn't anywhere else. He's here.
Is there any significance that the gospel went west? That Paul, when he was told at Philippi he was sent, the gospel has gone west typically?
Well, that is going to the whole world, the known world, right? The Roman Empire. That's what that's doing. So it's covering the whole world. Paul will say the gospel has been preached in the whole world. He's talking about the Roman Empire. So I don't think there's any symbolism there. It's simply that was where the Roman Empire was, and it was going to spread out to the whole known civilized world at that time, what they considered that. So I wouldn't connect that there. But again, like I'm saying, it's not every single time that you see whether they're going east or west, but here with Abraham, Garden of Eden, you'll see that there's that symbolism. There's something going on. When people move away from God, a lot of times, not always, but a lot of times, you'll look at Lot. He moves towards he's going towards the east, that kind of stuff.
But the east is very unevangelized if you think of how hard it's been to penetrate the gospel in Japan and China and some of these Eastern Korea, except for South Korea. I'm not trying to make something out of this. It just seems like the Eastern people became very difficult to, they have maintained a different kind of idolatry or...
It was definitely a different...
than the West.
Right. I don't know if there's anything to that. I know, again, just getting back to the biblical text there, you'll see some of these things where, and then that could be related to it. That could be related to it.
So in
I'm not
verse
sure.
2, at this time right now in verse 2, as they're traveling
Yeah.
to the east, is this all of of Noah's descendants at this time, they're still all traveling together? They've not split up yet?
Well, it doesn't appear that they really have. It appears that they're in a huge group. Who knows how far many of them have traveled away from one another at this point. The problem with a lot of the history, especially the early history of Genesis and things like that, is we don't have a lot of timelines, like real accurate timelines. We've got, so-and-so lived so many years, had this child, but there's not a lot of, like, how long was Adam and Eve in the garden? We don't know. We don't know. It couldn't have been, years, because they were told to be fruitful and multiply, and living in a perfect environment, they would have had children quick. I think it would have been, no problem. So it couldn't have been years. Otherwise, they'd be in rebellion to God's commands back then. But we don't know how long it was. Was it a week? Was it 6 weeks? Was it a couple months? We don't know. We're not sure. So it's like that through a lot of, especially the older timelines. And it's really not important, right? At the end of the day, if it was important, God would reveal it to us and say this is when it happened. But reading the text, it appears that they would have been all pretty much together at this point in time. That's the way the text reads, doesn't it? That they're all one group. We don't know how big the group is, but they were all one group, and there must have been enough of them because they start to try to build a city. So there's enough of these people around that they're going to do some building that goes on. I'm going to stop here. I don't want to go. We'll start over and kind of start this next week. Any other questions, thoughts, comments without getting into the text too far?
I see one of the sins of lust of the flesh, the lust of the eye, and the pride of life being found here.
Yes.
The pride of life.
You're absolutely right. 100% right. We'll talk about that next week. But yeah, we can see the pride, sin of pride. All right, if there's nothing else. Richard, would you mind closing us?